This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so I think I have everybody. Oh, Larry Fish. Larry Fish. I think I have everybody written down. So I will just run down the people that I have listed, and if I missed anybody, please holler. So I have Jake, Rich Jackson, Paul Lingone, Lenciera, Daniel in Oregon, Spokane, Carl Foreman, Sylvester, Jim Ward, Dennis Correa, Dick Bailey, Ken Anderson, and Larry Fish. Did I miss anybody? Good. Okay. Now, I know that Jim Ward has not been with us before. Is there anybody else on the call who has not participated? This is the first time they're participating. Okay. Paul Lingone, I don't recognize your name. Have you talked to us on this call before or on Peter's call?
Actually, I have not spoken to you before, but I was just going to keep a low profile. That's why I kept my mouth shut a second ago.
Okay, well, you can keep a low profile. I'll explain to you what we do, and then if you want to participate, you should feel free to.
Great, thank you.
So we will, if somebody has not been on the call before, we give them some time to talk a little bit about their situation and what particular issues they're facing right now, and we invite them to tell us how we can support them. So we will start with Jim Ward because we have a little bit of knowledge about Jim, not much, but just a little bit. And Jim, if you're comfortable doing it, and then we'll come to you, Paul, afterwards. If you'd like to, fine. If not, you're welcome to lurk as many times as you like until you're ready to talk to us.
Sure. I'm happy to, I'm happy to share, and I appreciate you guys having me in the group.
It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you. So I live in Kansas City, and I was diagnosed in December. I'm still trying to understand what all these numbers mean, but in December, after having a period where I had to urinate quite a bit, I went to my doctor and got a physical, and he sent me off for a PSA, and the PSA came back 210. So then I had the biopsy, and basically that kind of came in anywhere from 3 plus 3 to 4 plus 3 to 4 plus 4. So I guess in the end they always tend to go with a kind of the higher score and put me at from a treatment standpoint, I guess just sort of put me into high risk of a Gleason score of 8. I have begun treatment right at about 2 weeks ago. I started with the Casodex. So I'm doing the the deprivation and antigen deprivation therapy, ADT, I guess they call it. I actually have my first Lupron shot tomorrow, and then I guess I'm supposed to start Zytiga in about a month. They did a bone scan. The cancer hasn't, as far as I can tell, it hasn't migrated to the bones. They did a CT of my abdomen and my pelvis, and I guess that revealed that the lymph node, there's some enlargement of the lymph nodes. So I guess they believe that it has spread. to some extent to my lymph nodes. And so I think what I'm doing now is essentially this stampede treatment is what I've gathered. I'm being treated at the University of Kansas, which is one of those NCI cancer centers. It's not a comprehensive, but it's an NCI cancer center. I guess I've basically been told that, you know, this can't be cured. It can only be treated. I guess this the ADT treatment will shrink the prostate, will shrink the tumors to some extent, or the lymph nodes. But I guess there's a lymph node near the aorta, which there's going to be some radiation treatment, I guess, at some point, but they're saying they can't radiate the lymph node near the aorta. I don't know why. And so I guess, guys, that's kind of just an overview of where I'm at. I'm sure you all have been through this to some extent, but the biggest difficulty I have is, you know, it's just the uncertainty of, you know, the daily uncertainty of what I'm dealing with. You know, kind of not knowing from day to day what's next. I know there's a lot of side effects with all this therapy, the androgen, the hormone therapy is what I'll call it, I guess, hormone deprivation therapy. I know there's a lot of side effects with that. I got to tell you, I was a guy that, you know, tried to live right and live by all the rules, and you know, exercised regularly, ate right, never smoked, didn't drink a lot, you know, one or two beers a week, and you know, I probably did everything that I thought I was doing everything right. The only thing I guess I didn't do, which I've been, you know, kicking myself, is about a year ago I had a physical, and my internal medicine doctor told me that I had a PSA of about a 32.5. He didn't mention the word cancer once. He just said I should go see a urologist. He just said I should go see a urologist, and you know, I thought that was about the equivalent of, well, your triglycerides are high, you know, on your blood labs, and I didn't go see a urologist at the time, and you know, I felt fine. I felt fine until late this summer, when again I had to start urinating a lot, and I just realized that there was something that was not right. So I've got to somehow get over this idea that, I don't know if I'll ever get over it, but this idea that, you know, a year ago maybe I would have been dealing with something that was a lot more treatable than it is now, because it's, you know, I guess it's metastasized, I guess is the word. And it's just, you know, it's tough to live with so much uncertainty and fear, and not really knowing whether I'm getting the best treatment or not, and not knowing, you know, I know this hormone therapy treatment is only good for a certain period of time, and then I guess it loses its effectiveness after maybe 2 to 4 years. One of the doctors told me, you know, maybe I've got 6 to 10 years, you know, maybe, and it just, you know, it scares the hell out of me, and that's where I'm at.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for that summary. It's pretty helpful. There's a lot of information there. We maybe have a few other questions, but the first thing I want to tell you is that with a PSA of 32.5, it could easily have spread at that point in time, because 32.5 in and of itself is a pretty high PSA. So don't beat yourself up about only finding it when it was 32.5. If you would have told us that your PSA was 2.5 a year ago and it's 210 now, okay. But 32.5, we'll never know, but 32.5 is high enough. There are guys who have metastasized disease on this call whose PSA was not as high as 32.5 when they were diagnosed. So
right?
Everybody's different, but I want to just try and make you feel a little bit better that even at 32.5, you might be doing the same things you're doing now. I mean, the other good news is that wherever that disease is, there isn't enough of it to show up on a bone scan right now, and or on a CT scan, other than these suspicious lymph nodes. So, there's a good chance that you will be managing this successfully for a very long time. And there are guys right here on the call who are in that situation. They're a little older than you. I'm not going to ask you your age because I know, because you told us. So I'll share it with everybody else if you don't mind. Jim's 53. Let's. You originally reached out to me because you saw that Len had a somewhat similar diagnosis. So why don't we start with Len? And there's a few other guys, Ken Anderson maybe, who's closer to your age, and maybe Carl and a few other guys that can give you some encouragement here. Len, you want to kick off?
Okay, Rick. Well, welcome to the call, Jim, and thank you for that very clear and articulate description of your illness at the moment and how it came about. That was, as Rick said, very helpful.
Thank you.
And I do agree with Rick that there have been a lot of improvements in treatment just over the last 5 to 10 years, and the prognosis for guys like myself, like a bunch of us on this call, and like you, is quite a bit better than it was thought to be just 5 years ago. And they keep coming out with new therapies. So, don't be discouraged. And of course, you should not be in denial. I'm getting a little echo. And, accept it for what it is. Live life fully, but you're in good hands here. You've got a bunch of guys here with very similar stories, and we can help guide you through this. Yours is truly remarkably similar to mine. I guess you could say I was, I decided to do something a little bit sooner than you. My PSA was just under 50, and I did have also lymph node involvement, invasion of seminal vesicles. From my pathology report, quote, probable bladder invasion. And this was just under 5 years ago. And I'm doing much better than I thought I would be at this point. In large measure due to some of the guys on this call, namely Rick and one of our buddies who's since deceased, Dominic, and they encouraged me, even against the advice of a medical oncologist at Sloan Kettering, who only wanted to treat me with hormone therapy. Rick and Dominic encouraged me to have radiation therapy, and I think that made a huge difference.
Can I ask you a quick?
Sure, go right ahead.
I wanted to ask you a quick question, and you don't have to answer it now. You can circle back to it. Okay,
Sure.
Because I appreciate what you're telling me. I feel like when the radiation therapy comes around, I have a lot of questions about that, and at least two questions that I have is what kind of radiation therapy should I get, because they don't, and at the University of Kansas, which is a fairly well-respected cancer treatment center, it would be X-ray therapy, I believe, not like the proton or the pencil. I'm kind of learning about that stuff that you can get at some of these, really top flight places like MD Anderson or elsewhere. So that's one of my questions is, what's the radiation therapy I really should get? And then number two is, can they use that radiation therapy on the lymph nodes? And I guess I'm going to throw a third question, which is, why are they saying they can't use radiation on the lymph node near the aorta. Sorry, that's 3 questions, not 2, but I feel like that's a big decision point. I feel like the hormone therapy seems pretty standard, from what I can tell, and most people just kind of do the same thing. But when you hit that fork in the road, so to speak, about radiation therapy is where I don't want to screw up.
Right. And even that's evolving, the types of radiation therapy. I had IMRT to the prostate and to the full pelvic girdle, which is probably at a minimum what you should be having as well.
And what is that called?
IMRT, intensity modified radiation therapy.
Okay.
And
modulated.
Yeah, what did I say?
Modified.
Modulated. Yes, sorry about that. I think this is the most common form used for radiation therapy to the prostate and the full pelvic girdle. Used to be, at the time I was looking at radiation therapy, I was told by some pretty sharp guys in the field that another form of therapy called SBRT, you may have heard CyberKnife, was not appropriate for technical reasons. Maybe they've changed their mind on that. I'm not at all sure. But I would say definitely get a few opinions from radiation oncologists on what might be the best form of radiation therapy for you. As to why they can't target the lymph node that's by the aorta, probably because they're concerned about collateral damage to nearby organs and tissues. Maybe Peter can chime in about, Peter had some radiation therapy or proton therapy actually to lymph nodes in his aorto-abdominal region, I believe, and maybe he can help you out there. But I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's very good.
So
very
I just want to say one thing, Jim, and then we'll hold a couple of the other guys here. Traditionally, up until probably 5 years ago, there were only a couple of institutions in the country that would consider doing either surgery or radiation if you had lymphatic involvement or if you had metastatic, if you had bone metastasis. And a lot of the institutions around the country still think that way. But what we've seen more and more in the last 5 years, and especially so in the last 2 to 3 years, is GE medical oncology and urinary medical oncologists recommending debulking the primary tumor. You didn't tell us how many cores did they take and how many cores were positive.
Oh, on the biopsy?
Yeah.
Well, I know that the standard is supposed to be about 12. My urologist only took 4. And I asked him before I had the biopsy why he was only doing 4, and I guess his answer was kind of because he feels like he's pretty sure that that it was gonna be a cancer diagnosis, and he didn't want to do any more than necessary that might create a risk of infection or what have you. So my understanding is that, I don't know if but only 4 is according to the report that I'm looking at. It only shows 4 results, I guess.
Okay, and all four cores were positive.
Correct. All
Right.
four were positive.
So, the only thing is we don't really have a good feel about the extent of the cancer. It's probably, I'm not going to get into the sectors and what have you, but there's probably a fair amount of cancer in there. But we seem to feel now, we being, I guess, the community, the prostate cancer community seems to accept that doing radiation and debulking the primary tumor can have a real benefit, as it has done, one would think, for Len. And I want to leave enough time. We've got a lot of guys on the call today, so I want to be sure to leave enough time. So let me go quickly both to Peter and to Carl, and then I'll open it up. But if you could be both fairly concise in your comments, and just address this issue maybe of debulking, and how to do it. Peter, do you want to talk about IMRT versus SBRT versus proton beam, or how would you suggest Jim frames this discussion with his medical oncologist?
Yeah, sorry to go through this, Jim. Particularly at the young age you are. That's kind of a drag in your 50s, and don't beat yourself up over feeling that you did all the right things. All of us, most of us, probably live pretty healthy lives and still get bit by this. Second to skin cancer. This is the big one, and it gets a bunch of us in an aggressive way. So I had surgery off the bat, and then 11 months later I went back for IMRT radiation. I made it 2 years, and then my cancer metastasized. I've got an aggressive Gleason 9. My cancer metastasized to 2 lymph nodes, as Len said, in my abdominal area. I was at UCSF, and they wanted to do IMRT. They wanted to do SBRT, spot radiation to those. And I got a second opinion from Dr. Rossi down in San Diego, the California Proton Center, north of San Diego. And that's where I ended up going. I went to have 10 sessions of proton radiation, pencil beam proton to these 2 lymph nodes. I did that in the month of November. And there were no side effects of that. It all went well. The challenge that you're going to have is that proton beam radiation is approved for Medicare for prostate cancer, which is a big plus, but you're too young for that. Not on Medicare, I'm guessing. I'm pretty sure you're not on Medicare, which means you might have to pay out of pocket. But I would go. They have it at both MD Anderson, and they've got it up at Mayo, kind of in between those areas. I would go and get a consultation anyway. It's worth doing that and see if, because they can do very exacting things with pencil beam proton with no side effects and no collateral damage to nearby organs and tissue and so forth. And you might need to do a combination of several kinds of radiation, which is possible. I mean, proton beam was done on me after my regular 39 days of IMRT. As long as you're not in the same field, you can do both kinds of radiation. So you've got lots of possibilities there. I would get other opinions and shop around a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I will say that I made an appointment to go down to MD Anderson in February because I know they have the proton beam, and I just feel like I need to. I'm told they're among the best.
Who?
I'm sorry?
With whom have you made the appointment?
Oh, okay. If you know the doctors down there, that would be something. It's with Paul Korn.
Well, you cannot do better. Tell him tell him. Tell him we. I was going to say tell him we sent you, but we didn't send you. But we love Paul. He knows us very well. We refer people to him. Ken, you want to you want to chime in?
Can I, before you do that, Rick? That's your name, Rick, right? You have what I detect to be, I think, a British accent, right?
Once upon a time, yeah.
Okay. I spent a year studying in Bristol, so I sort of recognize it. But
yeah.
But so have you been treated by Dr. Korn, or just some people who have?
Well, I'm going to ask Ken Anderson to talk to you because he's currently being treated by Paul Korn.
Okay, wonderful.
Ken, are you there still?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. You can. Well, did Peter finish up though? Was Peter?
I'm done.
Yeah,
Right.
I want to move this along a little bit just in case Paul Lingo wants to.
I'll kind of keep mine brief. But yeah, I did do exactly kind of what you did. The first couple of months I was truly mental. I got diagnosed 2 years ago, and I had a Gleason 9. I must admit, I find 4 samples for your biopsy was a little lacking, because they did actually 22 when I had mine biopsied.
Wow.
MD Anderson does, in fact, it took me a couple months to figure out what I was going to do because, again, as Rick well knows, I was pretty mental about the diagnosis in general. I'm 58 now. I was diagnosed at 56. So I've been on the journey for 2 years now. Be happy to discuss kind of at another place and time kind of how I've gone and what I've done. But I think choosing MD Anderson or another place like MD Anderson to assist with kind of helping out, guide where you go and what you do is a great idea. You'll find Paul to be very straightforward and honest, and if you ask him a question, he'll tell you his opinion. He won't always say that he has the right treatment for you. He may, in fact, say someone else has a better treatment. And he's more than willing to be the quarterback and allow you to get, their treatment or your protocols fulfilled at more convenient locations. For me, I live in Phoenix, and my medical oncologist is here. My radiation oncologist is here. But Paul gives me directions, and most doctors don't like being told what to do, but for some reason he's able to convince them that it's the best route, and they go ahead and follow through with what he wants to do. So, but you'll find Paul to be a great guy.
Thank you. And so, can you say you live in Phoenix?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, that's been one of the frustrating things for me is communicating with doctors. And I don't say this disrespectfully to anyone whose first language isn't English. But I was an English major. I'm a practicing lawyer. I think being able to communicate clearly and providing information that can be understood is awfully important. And my God love him, the GU doctor that is heading up my care at KU. He hails from India, and it's very difficult to have that kind of very direct conversation. And I mean that I'm not saying that's the most important thing in the world, but to be able to talk to a doctor who communicates clearly and with less effort, such that if Dr. Korn can say what I heard you to say is, look, he's not afraid to say that maybe he doesn't have the best treatment, that you can do it another way. I mean, just to have someone who can be honest and straightforward and whom you can understand. I mean, just not having that extra layer. For me, it's already confusing and so difficult to comprehend all of this that I don't know. Maybe I'm making too much of a language barrier, but that's been a source of frustration for me.
Well, I can tell you, Jim, that Paul will, allow you to, to record your meeting, first meeting and subsequent meetings. You can walk in with a video a recorder, and he'll let you sit down and turn it on, and he'll tell you what his thoughts are, and you can then go back and review his chat in regards to what he thinks the proper kind of sequence of steps should be, which I found real helpful because I refer back to it all the time. And the next thing he's really good at is he doesn't use staff to reply to his emails, and he will give you his direct email. You can send him an email, and he will reply. It won't be an RN. I mean, I was sitting at my oncologist's office most recently and asked about, because I'm one of those that after 18 months on Lupron, my PSA started to rise. And I have 3 friends that between 18 and 24 months, Lupron, not that it failed, but it, you know, it doesn't work as much or as well. So anyway, I was sitting in my doctor's office, and within 2 minutes, he replied to a request to start Casedex as this as kind of a bridge between enzalutamide and Lupron, because I was getting ready to go on holiday, and I didn't really want to start, you know, another drug, you know, right then. So he's really good at, I mean, if it's an important topic, you reply pronto. If something question, you may have 2 weeks, and you may have to send him another request, and he'll eventually reply. At sometimes he takes time. He's got more fish to cook.
Ken, we're losing you a little bit, so
well, I'm pretty much done. I'm pretty much done.
Okay, you're coming in now. So, Carl, can you just take just 2 or 3 minutes, if you would, and just since you were recently diagnosed with metastasis, and you chose to debulk. Carl chose to debulk because he wasn't a suitable candidate for radiation, so there was good reason to do that. But I just want you to address the debulking, if you would, for Jim.
Okay, well, 2 to 3 minutes, as I probably could talk for at least 10, 15. But so I just recently turned 64. I was 63 when diagnosed. I had my biopsy, 16 core samples, 12 out of 16 were positive. Second opinions in the pathology report ended up with Johns Hopkins, Dr. Jonathan Epstein, who is the leading expert in pathology, and I was diagnosed with Gleason 10. So as with you, a lot of confusion, a lot of options. Which ones are right for me? I guess I don't know if any of us will ever know really which is the right type of treatment, but I ended up participating in a clinical trial, which I am in currently. And that clinical trial out of the Rutgers Cancer Institute in central New Jersey, where the premise is to determine the effectiveness of having robotic radical prostatectomy after having a period of time of ADT, androgen deprivation therapy. I'm using 4 different medications. I'm on Zytiga, along with prednisone and Eligard, which is, I guess, comparable to Lupron, as well as Xgeva for the bones. My metastasis is to the pelvic bone. I had all kinds of tests. I'm very big into research. I ask questions all the time. I recommend that everybody do that as well. I also recently found out that as a result of having genetic testing, at the recommendation of a well-known oncologist at Columbia Presbyterian in New York, he recommended, well, you know, I'm very impressed by all of the research you've done, but I haven't heard you having done genetics testing specifically. He turned me on to a test from Color, COLOR.com, a very simple test. It's a saliva test. I was then diagnosed with a genetic mutation, which I never knew I had. And these mutations you typically have from when you're born. And it's the BRCA2 genetic mutation, which is a very specific course of treatment for that. Although I'm somewhat excited that going forward, that should I become castrate resistant, and you talked briefly about that, with my Zytiga, which I've been on since July or so, my PSA is well under control. It started at 20 at the high right before my biopsy, is now down to 0.15. And so my surgery was November 14th, very recently, just about 6 weeks ago. So recovery is really a lot quicker than I expected. Incontinence is really kept to a minimum, quite honestly. And it's important to make sure you do the research, find the right doctors, find the surgeons, if you were to pursue that route, the ones who have the most experience. And so right now I'm comfortable with the decisions that I've made and the treatments that I'm pursuing.
Thanks, Carl. And I will add, we did actually discuss the genomic testing with Carl before the doctor, but he had a family, Carl had a significant family history too. So is there anyone on the call who would like to chip in and talk to Jim?
Jim, this is Peter again. Since you're young, have you thought about whether you're I mean, this is going to mess up probably your sexual activity. Have you thought about banking sperm if you're still able to produce it at this age?
No, I mean, I guess I thought it's crossed my mind. You know, my wife and I don't have kids. We've talked about it over the years. She's 10 years younger than me.
Well, in that situation, you might want to talk to the sperm bank, because very quickly the Casodex and the Lupron will start taking effect, and you might have a lot of difficulty. It can be done surgically, but you might want to consider this, since you are in your early 50s and your wife is quite a bit younger. You know, just look at that with a specialist.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I did that. Jim. I was diagnosed at 56 and decided I wanted to do it. And, you know, you would probably need to do it within the 2 weeks. It's easy to do, and you can, but you should talk to the docs about it pretty quickly, the GU docs. And if you want to do it, they probably have facilities at Kansas KU that you can do that. And thank you for raising that, Peter.
I guess I have one related question. And guys, I'm sorry, I don't mean to. I hope I'm not. I don't mean to monopolize this phone call. I'm very grateful for everybody, you know, sharing and commenting. But I mean, I've got my first Lupron shot literally scheduled, but I'm assuming that I wouldn't want to cancel that just for the sake of, you know, banking some sperm, right?
Look, the way that Lupron works, it actually increases your testosterone before it reduces it. Mm-hmm. So if you get your Lupron shot, it's not going to start bringing your testosterone down for a couple of weeks. That's why you've been taking the Casodex as a buffer. So you don't need to delay the shot. But if you're going to bank the sperm, you need to decide, because usually they'll want 2 or 3 samples. And so you need to sort of get on the stick and decide when you're going to do it, and do it relatively quickly.
Okay, like within a couple of weeks.
Within a couple of weeks, yeah. I mean, I don't even know exactly how to tell you, but before you get your Lupron shot, if you want to bank sperm, I would talk to your GU med-onc and tell him that's what you want to do. And, you know, if they have to delay it a week or so, it's not going to be the end of the world. But I don't think they will. But I'm not a doc, and we can't give you medical advice on this call anyway. We can only talk from our own experience.
Right, understood. Well, thank you for raising that.
Anyone else before we move on?
Rick, just a second for Jim. You mentioned uncertainty. I'm urging you to learn to accept and live with uncertainty. That will always be with you with this disease. There is no certainty. Accept it now, and you'll avoid a lot of anxiety and needless worry. It's just the way it is.
I just want to mention to you, there are a couple of calls that may be of interest. We are starting a support call for men with any type of cancer, which is a non-technical call, and it's basically for emotional support. I don't really like to use that term because as soon as you say emotional, men run the other way. But it's to deal with these issues that are bothering you right now about uncertainty, your future, and related. The call's going to be called Speaking Freely, and we're going to be starting it at the end of this month. It'll be the third
17th.
Thursday of this month. Third?
17th, third Thursday.
Third Thursday, 17th is the first call. I gotta get on the stick here. There is another call that used to be called the Inner Conversation, and that meets every Wednesday. And we can give you information on that. The third Thursday call will be, you'll join it exactly the same way you joined this one. So there's a couple of options for you if you want to get some additional support.
It sounds good.
Okay, and we also have a call for your wife. If she's interested, we have a caregivers call for men with advanced cancer. So we have to put you into that category. I hate to say it, but don't take the word advanced too seriously right now. Right, Len?
Sorry, I was
You're
muted.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree, Rick.
Okay. Jim, you know how to get a hold of us. I don't have your telephone number. You can send it through to me. If you want to be connected with any of the guys on this call, we can make that happen.
Okay, and I do that through you, Rick?
Yeah, come to me and then I'll connect you.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds really good.
Thanks. We got to move on because we've got a bunch of guys, and I also want to check in with Paul Langone. And Paul, would you like to talk to us a little bit, or would you rather wait until the next call?
Actually, yeah, if you don't mind, I do have a decision point coming up, which I can describe. I could use some feedback. Let me just give you a brief history on my background. I was diagnosed with localized high-risk prostate cancer this past summer. Over the past several years, my PSA had been creeping up. I'd had a biopsy a couple of years ago that was clean. And then this summer, I had a 18-core biopsy. 12 of those cores were random, and 6 of those cores were MRI fusion targeted. 4 of the 6 targeted cores had cancer, and 1 of the random ones did. The highest was a 4 + 5 = 9 Gleason. And I've since had a few different flavors of PET scans, and then I went to Phoenix and had the C11 acetate scan. Those all looked clean. Bone scan is clean. So from what we can tell diagnostically, it's still localized. I started ADT in early September, and then I've had HDR brachytherapy and IMRT at Stanford. I just completed the IMRT a couple of weeks ago. So I have, so I've been on Lupron, and then I started Zytiga in October. I am temporarily off of Zytiga because my liver enzymes have crept out of the normal range. And I just had another blood test yesterday. I don't have the results yet, but I'm speaking with a couple of medical oncologists later this week. So I don't know whether I'll be continuing on the Zytiga or not. But the big question for me at this point is whether to continue on with chemotherapy. Now, we know in the Stampede study that there were a couple of arms that looked at Zytiga and also looked at chemotherapy for high-risk localized non-metastatic cancer. And it showed about the same long-term outlook for either of those approaches. If I stay on the Zytiga, there is no study that I know of that shows any long-term outcome data for adding chemotherapy with the Zytiga. There is some data out there that shows value in terms measured in terms of disease progression free, but there is not any data out there to show the combination of and chemotherapy survivability or some of the other more preferred outcome measures. And so the question I'm going to be asking when I meet with the oncologists later this week is, does it make sense for me to also go on chemotherapy? There are obviously the downsides to chemotherapy, as well as once you use it, you can't use it again later if you need it, is my understanding.
Chemotherapy?
Yes.
No,
Is that
that's not the case. Yeah.
Okay.
But please finish, because I got a few questions for you. We've got some guys who can probably throw some light on this too.
Well, that's really just the question of whether I should go ahead and do the chemotherapy, which would most likely be 4 to 6 cycles of Taxotere.
So, who is quarterbacking your treatment, Paul?
So I'm working with Jeff Turner at Prostate Oncology Specialists in Marina Del Rey, California.
Okay.
And then I have a local, so I'm in the Bay Area, so I have a local medical oncologist, Shane Dormady, at El Camino Hospital. And so he's sort of my local guy I see every month, and then I go down and see Rick Turner every couple of months.
And so you're not seeing a GU Med-Onc at Stanford?
Well, so originally my urologist was at Stanford, and I was 3 days away from getting a radical prostatectomy, and then I looked at the Parton tables and realized that would be a big mistake. I did have my HDR and my IMRT at Stanford.
Okay, and who are the doctors you're going to be talking with this week?
So I will be on Thursday. I'll be talking with Jeff Turner, who's at Prostate Oncology Specialists, and then Friday I'll be talking with Shane Dormady.
Okay. Well, we know Jeff Turner very well. He's Peter's doctor, and I met him. I don't know Dormady. I do know a bunch of the doctors because I lived in the Bay Area for 15 years until last year. So I do know some of the docs there. I also want to say something quickly about ALT and AST. It may not be the Zytiga. It could be because Zytiga acts through the liver, but it may not be the Zytiga that's causing the problem, because I was on Lupron for 28 months and I had a high ALT and AST the whole of that time. Not very high, but it was marginally, it was a couple of points over the limit, both the ALT and the AST the whole time. It can, the LHRH drug can affect your liver. It's not usual, but it can happen. And, and I can tell you that from experience.
Okay,
So,
that's a good data point.
So it's possible that the LHRH disturbed your liver and the Zytiga aggravated it. I don't know. I don't know enough about how Zytiga actually impacts the liver. I know it processes through the liver. But I just wanted to mention that to you.
Good, thank you.
And I stayed on the LHRH, and I felt liverish. Jim Ward will understand that word, liverish. It's an English word, but it's like I felt like crummy the whole time, just a little bit nauseous all the time I was on my all the time I was on the Lupron, and that was just from having these high liver numbers. The second thing I want to do is refer you on our website to the Prostate Cancer Resources tab, and you'll find some good discussions about chemo versus Zytiga. And there's a little bit of discussion, and it's a discussion between Chuck Ryan, Chris Sweeney, and Alicia Morgans, all of whom are excellent. And they do talk a little bit about the two together. And we have, I'm trying to remember if Ken, did you do Zytiga at the same time? You did not, did you? Is Ken there still? Yes, but his microphone's off. I'm trying to remember. Well, let me throw it open. Is there anybody on the call who's done either enzalutamide or Zytiga at the same time as chemotherapy?
I did the chemotherapy with Lupron at the same time.
Right. That's pretty
common.
And
and that took it down, and then I had to add the Zytiga with the prednisone
afterwards. Later. Right. And I know that there's a lot of guys that have definitely done that. But has anybody done the two together at the same time? It's the sort of thing that they might recommend to you, that somebody like Turner might recommend, but the issue really is the side effects. Peter, you want to say something?
Sure. I'm a little confused. I've had Jeff Turner for just about 5 years. I saw him from the get-go. And he's a great doc from my standpoint. I'm going to meet with him on the phone next week. Are you seeing PSA rising? Are you getting doubling time? Is there some action going on? Or are you just doing the whack-a-mole, thinking about doing whack-a-mole and hitting it with everything you can right now?
It's the latter. It's the latter. It's belt and suspenders. It's like, let's throw everything at it we can.
Yeah, I can't second guess Dr. Turner. I have a lot of respect for him. I know they're aggressive, but if I went to him in this situation, like if I went to him next week and told him I want to start chemo, I've already just a year of Zytiga. I've already done surgery, I've done radiation, I've already done proton radiation. I think he would put the brakes on me and say, "Wait, let's watch this thing and see." I'm a Gleason 9 as well, and I know it will spread someday, but I don't know. I don't want to second guess him, but I think he would probably put the brakes on me and hang on, let's wait until we see some evidence of something, particularly if you've just done brachy. And brachy is very highly effective. Um, I would, if it was me, I would wait and see how effective the brachy was, and whether there's any indication that I need to keep moving on this. That's just me. That's my opinion. It's not a medical opinion.
Okay. Yeah,
How
I
old are you,
personally am on the
Paul?
fence at this moment. So, he's going to have a lot, he's going to have a lot of input. And I'm looking forward to that. But I've been sort of vacillating, going back and forth. And I'm really on the
How
fence at
old are
this
you,
point.
Paul?
I am 66.
You're
And I
66.
have no other
And
comorbidities or anything.
okay, and give us some idea as to your PSA, because you said it was creeping up, and how high did it get to, and how quickly did it come down after you started the ADT?
So when I was first diagnosed, it was 14 and a half. The high was 18, and I'm responding very, very well to ADT. It's less than 0.01, and it's been that way for a couple of months.
Okay, and you said you were diagnosed in the summer, is that right?
Yeah, it was in May.
Okay. Well, I think the concern that we all have is the comorbidity from doing both at the same time. I mean, I know one person that's kind of doing both at the same time, but that's because they were on enzalutamide for a long time and they deferred their chemotherapy, and now they've started the chemotherapy, and I think they stopped the enzalutamide. But it's a lot. It's a lot to bear. One thing I do want to do, I will send to you, Paul, and I will send to Jim, is I want to send you a hormone therapy pamphlet that we produced at UCSF, which is very helpful, and will at least give you a frame of reference for some of the side effects you may encounter, and I'll get that link out to you. It's linked on our website, but I'll also get the link. Make sure I get the link out to you afterwards.
Okay,
Great.
Rick, I have a question.
Yeah.
If I want to contact you later, how can I send you an email somehow?
You can. You can email me at rd@ancan.org.
rd@ncan.org. Okay, great.
Yeah. So I will, but I'll get something out to both of you. Is there anyone that would like to say anything to Paul before we move on to the round robin?
Paul, there's a great group that meets at El Camino once a month.
Yeah, actually, I go to that.
Okay, good.
And they are excellent. I'm just
Yes. Okay.
you never
Good.
know what
Okay.
little ideas you're going to get out of new ones. So that's why
a lot of them work with Dr. Dormandy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Paul, this is Len. Transient increases in liver enzymes, blood levels is not uncommon with Zytiga, and they tend to normalize within a couple of months. So I wouldn't worry about that.
So I could potentially continue with the Zytiga as long as I'm monitoring pretty tightly.
Yes, definitely.
Just to make sure it doesn't go crazy.
Right.
Okay, that's a good thought.
It's not at all uncommon because it happened to me as well.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else like to say anything to Paul, or any thoughts on doing chemotherapy and Zytiga at the same time? Quiet lot tonight.
Well,
Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it.
I'd say that with an undetectable PSA on the Zytiga, why throw in chemo? I certainly wouldn't do it.
Well, they're talking micromets. I mean, and the micromets, you never know where they're going to be and when they're going to show up. So that's kind of the belt and suspenders argument.
Yeah, well, as Rick said, don't overlook the comorbidities of those two treatments. You don't want to knock down
on the Zytiga, I've not had any problem. Now, I was only on the Zytiga for probably about 6 weeks, but I didn't have any problem at that point. But do some people have problems with Zytiga?
Well, long term, it does cause immunosuppression. You'll see your hemoglobin, hematocrit go down, and of course, you have that same side effect from chemotherapy. It wreaks havoc with your bone marrow.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, there's no guarantee you're going to get rid of micrometastasis. I mean, I had my micrometastasis showed up 2 years after my radiation, and I zapped it with proton beam. There were 2 lymph nodes, and I'm hoping I'm going to get another 2 years now out of it before I think about doing chemo.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, my wife's against it. She doesn't. She tries not to tell me, but I can tell.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, good to have you. Good to talk to you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Come back, Paul. Keep talking to us. We have lots of ideas. Peter's recommendation for the El Camino group. There's a lot of smart guys there. There's a couple of guys that attend this group who go to that group too. So we'll guide you any which way we can. Okay, I see the only person, Paul Frieda and Richard Foodie have joined us as well. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So let me figure out who needs some time tonight. We've got about an hour, just under. So let me go through. Jake, anything you'd like to talk about tonight?
No, I just want one clarification from last week. Something I said wrong. Surprise, surprise.
Well, tell us right now, because we'll get it out of the way.
Dennis was mentioning hearing loss from, and he wasn't quite sure what caused it. And I said that Zytiga, Xtandi does cause hearing loss. I was wrong. It does not. It is a side effect of chemo, and I'm not sure about Zytiga, but
okay,
that's all.
We'll forgive you. You're not even going to lose any brownie points for that one.
Okay.
Okay. Rich Jackson, anything for you tonight, sir?
Still in a holding pattern, waiting for things to wear off and get some honest numbers and see where I stand.
All right. Okay. So we did not renew. We're waiting for stuff to wear off. Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So I'll just make a note in my in my charts here. Len, anything for you?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay. Daniel, I don't think I've spoken to you, but I think you were on the call last week. Is there anything you'd like to follow up with this week?
No, not really. I did start radiation treatment last Thursday for 4 weeks, and Friday I started my Zytiga, so we'll be monitoring the liver stuff, of course, but that's about it.
Okay. Well, I have to get some notes on you, which I will do. Gary, anything for you? Are you still with us, Gary?
I don't see him.
No, he was here and he's gone. Must have been something we said. Okay. Carl, would you like some time tonight?
Yes, specifically relating to applying for Social Security disability.
Okay. You're the expert there. You're coming to us to ask us questions.
Well, I did apply and I got a denial. I applied and I just got a denial 2 days ago. So.
Okay. All right. We'll come to you. Sylvester, anything for you?
No, thank you very much.
Dennis, anything for you tonight?
Nothing for me, Rick. Thank you.
Okay, Dick Bailey, would you like any time tonight?
Oh, not really. I have just started my Provenge immunotherapy treatment. I have my infusion today, and I see my oncologist, radiation oncologist, tomorrow. But other than that, things are still the same.
Okay. Well, we'll just check in with you on the Provenge because there's a couple of little things I just want to mention to you on Provenge. Ken Anderson, anything for you?
Yeah, I have two things, if I could.
Okay, we'll come to you. I think we're going to have time. Larry Fish, anything for you?
No, I'm okay. Thank you, Ricky.
Okay. And Mr. Foodie, I know you need some time, so we'll definitely give you some time.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay. And Paul, anything for you?
Yeah, I've got a minor update to talk about.
Okay. So I think we should do fine. Let's kick off quickly with Carl. And you say that you got a denial?
Yes, I was on an accelerated application, so I was told. I think it was somewhere about 2 months or so when I finally got the letter just the other day saying that I'm doing well with therapy, which I don't disagree with. I had my surgery, I had physical therapy, everything has been positive. But I have been told, maybe rightly or wrongly, that because of my diagnosis, that I have metastatic stage 4 prostate cancer, that should make me a shoo-in for getting approval for SSDI. I'm now 64. I was 63 at the time of diagnosis. And I did not want to start taking Social Security until my full retirement age at 66 and 3 months. And so the reconsideration process, I actually put in as much information as possible, added additional information this morning, and it was done electronically, and I sent it along, hit the send button, and hope that, based upon the additional information that I put into that maybe they'll change their mind. But people have typically told me, well, don't expect that. And the next step would be that I would have a hearing with an administrative judge, which they typically are pretty reasonable, and much more so than the people who have been reviewing my case so far.
Okay, so I'm going to put right now. I'm going to put in the chat window the Social Security document that indicates that you're automatically approved. And I don't understand. I mean, I just don't understand. Now, it's right there. I just put it in the chat window for you.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
And, I mean, we've known a lot of guys, and if you've got metastasis, you are automatically approved, as I understood it. Now, let me just tell you, and I would be talking to them and asking them what's going on here. I was denied, like you, but I didn't have metastasis. I probably had I may have had micrometastasis. We don't know. And I didn't apply until a year or more into my Lupron, and I wasn't doing that well. And I was turned down, and I appealed, and I got it on the appeal at the hearing.
Right.
So you can go through all of that, but the whole point of this accelerated appeal is that you shouldn't have to. And so I am confused. I mean, you have hormone refractory disease. Well, maybe you don't, because you're not hormone refractory.
Well, I guess just to quickly go through the letter saying, let's see, you said you were disabled because of side effects of ongoing cancer treatment, stress, anxiety, brain fog, fatigue, robotic prostatectomy, tightness in legs. The following factors were considered in making a decision. Your mental condition has not affected your ability to understand, remember, cooperate with others, and perform normal daily activities, etc., etc. I know you're limited with time, so I won't go into everything.
Right, but your wife doesn't agree with that, does she?
No. Neither do I.
All right.
But interesting here too. One more point out of several. It says therapy has been successful in controlling your condition. What? Well, I guess technically that's true. My PSA is controlled, but it's not curable.
Well, I think that, and they may have changed this because this looks a little different to what I've seen before. I haven't looked at this document for a while, but they may have changed this to require that you're now not just metastatic, but that you're castrate resistant, which of course you're not. Right. What I would say is this: I had all these issues, the issues you talk about, and by the time I applied, I mean, I could not have held down a job. And I basically said to them, look, my job is to exercise, and I do that every day, and that's the first thing I do. And I come back and then I take a nap, and I said, I'm not in shape to go out and work after that. This is how it affects me. And they bought it. So and so that's really what can I say? I was also 50. I was in my 50s, and they may turn around and say to you, well, you can start right now. You can take your Social Security early.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, we're not going to, because what happened, here's the thing. When they give you that Social Security benefit, they gave it to me as if I was 66.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, they may be just arguing with you, do we have to give you your benefit as if you were 66, or you can take it now at 64, whatever that difference is. And frankly, when you look at the time value of money, because I did this for a buddy, it doesn't come out hugely different.
Yeah. Yeah. When I figured, well, I give it a shot, as most people have told me, hey, you're metastatic, it's an automatic approval.
Yeah, well, I guess what we're seeing right now is it's not metastatic, it's not just metastatic, it is metastatic and castrate resistant.
Could be. They didn't say anything about that in the letter, of course. And maybe I thought maybe they didn't understand. Well, stage 4 means metastatic, and they may not have been clear in my initial application. And I sure made sure to be clear in my reconsideration process.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, I think I may have something else, but I've got to look for it. I may have one other document, but I can't look for it whilst I'm on the call. So I'll check along the way.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and
Thank
good
you.
luck. And you're doing you're doing the right thing to appeal.
Yeah.
And I do have one piece of advice. If you're going to appeal, it's worth getting a lawyer involved.
Yes, but however, it's been recommended to me that it's a little too early in the process. Well, again, I did not use a lawyer to do the reconsideration application. After that, yes, then it becomes more of a decision to bring in a lawyer.
Exactly. I didn't use a lawyer until I got turned down, but it is a good idea to use a lawyer for the appeal.
Yes.
Because they know the buttons to push.
Right.
And they're limited in how much they can take.
Yes, no more than 25%, yeah.
I thought it was 15.
Well, maybe here in the Northeast it's a little different, but it's up to 25%.
It's a federal thing.
Oh.
But wouldn't that negate the advantage of getting Social Security early if you have to pay that much to a lawyer?
That's the $64,000 question. That's right.
Yeah, I mean that's another issue. I mean, I was applying again at age 50. I think when I applied, I was 58. So that's a bit different.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's definitely worth having a chat with a lawyer. You've got to find an SS. The only guy that I know is in California, so he's not going to help you. They're kind of hard to find as well.
Yeah, I found one via the internet that's relatively close to me who used to work for the Social Security Administration as an attorney, and he was a trainer for everybody else. So we'll see.
Okay. All right. Thank you for raising it. Dick Bailey, Provenge. How did you do today?
Yeah, so far nothing. No, I don't feel chills. I don't have any fever or anything, so I feel fine.
Good. I think there's some other guys on the call that have done Provenge. I'm not sure. The only thing I wanted, a couple of guys have found, sometimes not the first time, sometimes the second time, that they had issues halfway through the infusion. And it's usually been related to hydration. And they've stopped. They've given the patient a drip for 45 minutes, and then they've resumed, and everything's been fine. So, if for any reason you do feel crummy during the reinfusion, then that's just something to bear in mind.
You know, I try to stay pretty well hydrated for both the draw and for the infusion.
Well, Dick, you only had the plasmapheresis, right? They didn't reinfuse your white blood cells.
The infusion was today. I did the draw on Friday.
Oh, okay.
And then today was the infusion.
Okay.
Yeah. What's that word again, Len?
Plasmapheresis.
It's called leukapheresis is what it's actually called.
Leukapheresis.
Leukapheresis is what it's actually.
White blood cells in the plasma.
Yep.
Yeah, leukapheresis. Thank you. All right. Anybody? Has anybody else on the call done Provenge?
I've heard that it's actually not necessarily a good thing that you don't get a reaction. because they wonder if it's actually stimulating your immune system. But
I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know. But I am a big fan of Provenge. I think that it's like it really cannot hurt you, and it certainly may help. And the earlier you do it, the better you are. So good on you, Dick. And I hope that the next two sessions is just as easy as the first one.
Yeah, so do I.
Okay. Okay. Ken.
Okay, first question is for Lynn. What to do with this BAT, bipolar antigen therapy? Is that something you're doing right now or have done?
Sorry, can you say that again? We kind of lost you just as you started.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was a question for Lynn in regards to BAT. Has anyone done that? Bipolar antigen therapy.
Right. Go ahead, Ken. Len.
I have not. I'm not aware of anyone on the call today who's done that. I believe that we had somebody in Utah who did that. It wasn't successful, right, Rick? I forget his name.
In Utah?
Yeah,
no,
or Idaho.
in DC.
The fellow who,
yes.
yeah,
We did.
lived in the woods.
Correct.
Frank Kelly.
Yes.
Frank Kelly, thanks.
Yeah. Yes. And Tebow has sort of done it too.
All right. Well, my doctor said my doctor here locally, the medical oncologist, said she would absolutely not do it. But, I was just kind of looking, and I thought Lynn had once stated that he had either done it or maybe it was that he knew someone that did it. So I'm okay. I'm going to give a pass on that one. The next one is I went ahead with the liquid biopsy, and the report came back with MSI undeterminable or something like that, where they couldn't determine whether or not I was positive or not. And I put a call into them. Anyone else had the same result from that liquid biopsy, where they couldn't determine whether it was high volume or whatever it's called or not?
I have known, I'm just trying to remember, but yes, I'm certainly aware of at least one other person who's had an issue where they were unable to determine.
Do you think that's blood sample, or because no one could tell me when I called in there whether it was blood sample related or if something else was the cause. So I don't know if I just need to submit another sample of blood. And I guess I'll wait and I think I'll call the guy that Rick Marshak, and see if he has any input. Because I thought maybe if it's if they can't determine whether or not there is high volume, then maybe I need to do a biopsy of my prostate to see whether or not Keytruda or one of those drugs is going to work for me.
Well, let me ask you something else. Were they able to give you a full analysis of your sequencing? Were they able to do the sequencing on their 80 gene panel?
Yeah, they did. There were only 2 genes that they had noted, but they said they were not actionable. It's probably one that, or I'm going to send it to Paul tomorrow because they just picked it up tonight. So
okay,
I'll ask him the same.
What was the they may mean, they may not mean to me, but what were the ones that were not actionable?
I know, I'll tell you right now. Just as we were starting to talk, I was going to my briefcase and I'll pull it out and tell you.
Okay.
The ones that they have listed on here are TP53 and R280G.
What's the second one?
R280G.
Okay, I don't know R280G. I do know TP53, but there's a lot of there's a buzz around TP53 that it may become actionable there was a guy at the Foundation Medicine, another patient advocate when I was there, and he seems to think that TP3 is actionable. Bill has TP53, and I owe Bill some information, or I've got to get hold of this guy and get him to and find out more. But you might want to talk to Bill about TP53.
Okay, we'll do.
My understanding about TP53, they've been targeting that mutation for many decades without success. So I'd be surprised to hear that it's now actionable, but it's possible.
Well, they're showing it as non-actionable, but I've just heard some stuff recently from this guy, Don, who has lung cancer, that there may be some action on TP53, but I just don't know enough. But Paul is probably going to know about that too.
Yeah,
also,
he doesn't have it yet. I'll send it forward and see if he agrees that if in fact they didn't get, I mean, I don't know why they couldn't make a determination on the MSI, but if they cannot, then maybe they have to do a biopsy of the solid tissue.
You know, the best person to ask that question, because technically he'll understand it probably even better than Paul, is Bill.
Bill, okay. I don't have his contact. Could you send it to me, Rick, or tell it to me now?
Yeah, I'll send it. I'll write it down to follow up afterwards. But I talked to him yesterday. He's a little miserable because he's dealing with a UTI again, and the docetaxel has created some systemic inflammation for him. He's feeling much better than he did last week, but he didn't sound too bad. I thought he might join us tonight, but he didn't. But I'll connect you, and you know, you can give him a buzz, and he's most likely to know why they were unable to determine your MSI from the liquid biopsy and whether they could. But him and also you follow up with David. I just can't tell you. But you know, to some extent, it's well, there's no measurement on the PDL1, right?
There's not.
No. So you know, if you're not looking at Keytruda right now, or
Paul was stating a game plan in the near future. If I had a couple mismatch repair, he said he would be more than willing to recommend Keytruda as a possible. Next.
Okay.
So that's why he was kind of pushing or a liquid biopsy. That's why I went through it over the holidays. I got that blood taken up in the north.
You did a liquid biopsy. All right. Well, I'll you know.
Okay. But
I'll connect you, and we'll also talk to David Marshak. I talked to David today, actually. I'll send him a note and copy you and ask him whether, you know, what technically what the issue is around measuring the MSI on a liquid biopsy.
Okay, next quick thing, and I hope it's quick.
Yes.
This adding radium-223 along with enzalutamide, what do you think about that? Have you had anyone that's done it?
If it were me, I would not do it, because I don't think that radium-223 is a particularly good drug in light of what we have today.
Okay.
It's not defined enough. It's got risks of, I mean, all these drugs have risks of myelosuppression and going at the bone marrow. But personally, why would I do radium-223 if I could do a PSMA-driven radionuclide?
Okay.
Len?
It was just
Well, let me throw that one out. Len?
Yeah, I agree with you, Rick. Of course, the lutetium, PSMA, radionuclides are not approved yet, so you'd have to get yourself into a trial. And then I wonder if it's possible that they could put you in a placebo arm. I'm not sure.
I know that's what and that's usually what they are. You go into the trial and it's randomized, so it's 50-50 and maybe even worse. So either I get confirmation that a treatment, at least in my head, is one that plays some advantage and I go for it, or I don't. So I'm not going to go placebo route.
Just a quick little note, if you go into a phase 2 trial, there are no placebos. It's just a question of what the dosage is, so
Gotcha.
that could have some attraction.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe the lutetium, they're all phase 3 trials at this point.
Well, I don't know what's
as far as the Xtandi and radium-223, I don't know if there's any studies on that, but I do know that Zytiga and radium-223 are a definite no-no. They increase the risk of death. There's been some studies on that very recently, so I would suspect that Xtandi and radium-223 are going to be similar dangers. So
Yeah, I had heard that too, Jake.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, gentlemen, this is Jim Ward. I apologize for interrupting, but I had something I had something at 8:30 that I needed to jump off the call. But I wanted to thank everybody for welcoming me and providing such great information and support.
Hey, Jim, I wanted to add one.
We'll talk to you soon.
Jim, one thing though, when you get your PSA, make sure they pull your testosterone. It's a big thing. You got to make sure that whatever drug you're taking.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for raising that, Ken. Jim, be sure to get your testosterone taken tomorrow before the Lupron shot.
And also,
I'm sorry, do what now?
That's for the ultra-sensitive PSA as well.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry.
Let's just go one at a time, Ken. Make sure you get a testosterone measurement before your first Lupron shot. So
okay,
you know what you're. Go ahead.
I got one.
Okay.
And they told me it was low.
Okay, but the only reason is because they is. So if that's what your testosterone is now. If you come off or you take a holiday at any point, you know where you were before you even started with the hormone therapy.
Yeah, I can tell you it was 238.
Okay, that's pretty low, but at least you know that. Okay, as long as you know it, that's important. That's the point. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Pleasure. Let's just head back to Ken for the instant.
I was pretty much wrapped up. I was pretty much wrapped up, unless you had something to add.
Well, no, I just, I just feel, as far as these are concerned, Almeida's doing one where he's actually trialing a different agent, not 617, something called R2. And that is definitely not, and it may be a phase 2. I'm not sure. Paul may know that from his trip down there. But he, you would certainly get it. Some of these are randomized. Some of them are randomized 2-to-1. Ken, they're going to start one, I think, at MD Anderson. So Paul will tell you more about that. But I think right now, I wouldn't mess with the radium personally. I'd be looking to try and figure out how I can get the lutetium or the actium.
That's probably what Paul's going to tell me when I put in my request. I'm going to ask him pretty much what we've covered here, and he's probably going to give me similar replies.
Okay. Okay.
Rick, can I just comment one more thing for Ken?
Yeah.
Talk to your doctor about this, but my understanding is that the PSMA radionuclide targeting destroys your salivary glands. So think about quality of life with no saliva. Now that's what I've heard, and I believe I've read it as well. But discuss it with your doctor. Get his take on that.
Okay, will do.
So it doesn't destroy, but it can affect, and I don't think it's permanent. Because
I heard it was.
I don't think so. And I have known some guys that have done it. They had issues during the time, but then they recovered. Anybody else know anyone that's done lutetium? The issue is that the salivary glands make prostate-specific membrane antigen, as do certain other organs, but very few in the body. And that's why the lutetium affects them. But I didn't think that I don't think it's, I don't want to be alarmist, and I don't think it's a permanent issue. But Len may be correct, so, you can pursue it.
I'll ask Paul.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to remember what else we talked about with you, Ken, because I'm making my notes here. I'll remember later. Okay, Mr. Foodie, welcome back. We always like to hear your voice.
Well, thank you very much.
Tell the guys where you're at and ask them your question.
Okay, I'll do a quick recap. I was diagnosed in 2012 by a urologist in Westchester, New York, and I went into active denial. I was losing my job. 6 months later, I was taking care of my mom and my older brother, and so I just didn't do anything about it. An insurance company called me 9 months later and said, "What are you doing about it?" So they said, "You need to get a second opinion," which led me to Memorial Sloan Kettering in March of 2013. Dr. Dana Rathkoff, she did another examination and found that I was stage 4. The prostate cancer had spread from to my bones, my sternum, and my right hip. My Gleason was a 7, 3 plus 4. And at that point, my PSA was 8.64. She said, "I can't cure you, but I can manage your disease." I went on hormone deprivation therapy. I've been on Lupron now for 5.5 years. I was also on Zometa for 5 years. I started off with Casodex, and that stopped working after 18 months. Then I was on Xtandi for 4 years, and that just stopped working. It became apparent between September of this year and December that the Xtandi was not working. My PSA doubled from 0.75 to 1.8 between September and December, and a CT scan in December showed that there's a new mass. It's a 3-centimeter mass. They said superior to the prostate gland, and I guess that means it's above the prostate gland. I'm not sure exactly. I have to find out more about that. But they did a biopsy on December 31st, and I don't have the results on it because Dr. Rathkoff wanted to get a second opinion on this biopsy. But anyhow, in December 13th, when we talked about what's next, Dr. Rathkoff said that it's, she believed that Xtandi was no longer working, and she said that it's common, for I had a really good run for 4 years, and that this androgen receptor blocker, sometimes like cancer learns to work around these medications. That's what happened with Casodex, and so she thought that that's what was happening with Xtandi, I have a high regard and respect for Dr. Rathkoff. She's not only is she a clinician, but she's also involved in research at Memorial Sloan Kettering. So that's why I selected her as an oncologist, not as a urologist oncology, but she's a medical oncologist with specialty in prostate cancer. And so she took me through 3 different. Oh, and I guess I'll back up a little bit. Over the course of the summer, she had me participate in genomic profiling. I'm a part of the MSK impact study where they did through blood work. They did a genomic. If I'm not pronouncing this correctly, I'm sorry, but genomic profiling. So with every blood test I have now, they're able to do some sort of a comparison to genes and things like that, and mutations and so forth. So I was very grateful for that, because that was something that Rick had asked me to encourage Dr. Rathkoff to do, and well, it finally happened this past summer. So in December, she went through 3 possibilities of subsequent treatments, and this was a real big surprise. So, and I didn't, I believe her and I trust her, and I could just, I've known her for all these years, and I've always, like Rick is my mentor, and so he trained me to always ask questions of Dr. Rathkoff. So now when I show up for my 3-month follow-ups, she walks in the room, she says, "Well, what do you have for me?" So I've got a Rick type of question to ask her, and so we always have a good conversation about different thoughts, treatments, programs, and things, stuff like that. So, and she's always been very straight with me. So she went through these 3 different possibilities, and she did pros and cons, and so none of them were like removed off of the table. But she said, there's an opportunity here for you, and I think you're a really good candidate for it. And we're doing a phase 2 clinical trial, and it's now somebody earlier had talked about Zytiga and a chemotherapy. Well, this is something that Memorial Sloan Kettering and 3 other cancer centers around the United States are doing right now. It's a phase 2 clinical trial with Zytiga and prednisone and prednisone and a chemotherapy called cabazitaxel. Now, Rick, I sent Rick an email, and he educated me as far as how things work. And the first type of chemotherapy that might be prescribed to men with prostate cancer would be the docetaxel, and then when that stops working, on the second line is this cabazitaxel. So with this clinical trial, what they want to do is they want to test Zytiga, prednisone plus cabazitaxel, and see if that combination of FDA-approved drugs are effective in managing the prostate cancer and or destroying the prostate cancer. This all happened very fast, and I said, okay, I'm in. And then they were ready to ship me off to chemotherapy, and I just started a new job in September, and it's like, holy cow, they're talking like, do this, do that, and it's like, what about my job? What about my I just can't not show up for work. So anyhow, thank goodness that Dr. Rathkoff wanted to get a second opinion on this pathology report from the biopsy, because it just sort of stopped things in its track. I'm having an appointment with Dr. Rathkoff on Friday. Rick has prepared me with a list of questions to talk to her about, because there are questions that Rick asked me. If if I knew the answer to, and I don't know. So, and he said, don't rush into a clinical trial until you're clear about what it is. So, the reason I mention that is because, I think, while I think that, it's kind of ironic that here we are, just everyday Joes, and we've got this disease, and we're working with high caliber medical professionals, and we have to become high caliber medical professionals ourselves, so that we understand what they're doing, what they're saying, so that we can participate in the decision making to make the best choices for ourselves. And there's always risk involved. Sometimes we have to, take a chance. But I want to be sure that I understand what chance it is that I'm taking. And so anyhow, I'm still in favor of proceeding. However, I do need to get some answers to these questions, among other things. What if we just did the Zytiga and then did the chemotherapy? Why did we have to do the both? Somebody mentioned earlier, well, if you take chemotherapy, you can't take it again. That's a real question, and I need to ask that and see what Dr. Rathkoff says, so that I'm clear in my mind and I'm confident. So there's a number of questions that I have that Rick has prompted me to ask, and then the monitoring. They talk about the liver.
So let me interrupt you. Running a little bit short on time, and I suddenly realized, Peter, did I ask you if you needed some time today? I think I forgot.
No, I'm past. I shot my water earlier in the day. I'm okay.
Are you sure? I'm really sorry. I always do it to you.
No,
I feel so bad.
I'm okay. I'm doing fine.
Okay. So, and I know we got to stop up with Paul. So I think the issue is this, that we want to discuss in this group. Richard had a fantastic run out of Xtandi. Fantastic. The only person that's giving him a run for his money is Jake. Jake, how long have you been on Xtandi? 2 years? Okay, well, Foodie got 4 years out of it, so you got 2 more to go. Okay, and
I did want to ask him a question.
Okay, you can do that in a second. So we know we know he got a great run out of Xtandi. We know that I think it's about 8 to 10% of men who fail Xtandi get something out of Zytiga. Does anybody remember what that percentage is? I think that's right. I'm not certain. I think that's right. 10%. And then we've got 10%. And then we've got a chemotherapy that's available. And all of these drugs are readily available. You don't need to be in a trial for them. So, my question is, what benefit are we getting from the trial? The only possible benefit is that Richard gets cabazitaxel as a first-line chemo instead of docetaxel. And cabazitaxel can be given as a first-line chemotherapy, but then you have to ask yourself, well, does that mean you wouldn't do docetaxel later? And by the way, you can do docetaxel as many times as you want to do it. I think that was we never came back to that for Paul Langone, but I know people that have come back and done 40 sessions of docetaxel, and people who have stopped it and then restarted it. You can always come back to the docetaxel. So what I've got to ask everybody is, what do you think about doing a trial where the drugs are readily available? Oh, and I also want to give credit to Len for some of those questions. Foodie, it wasn't just me. Don't forget Len.
Well, you guys work together so well as a team.
Okay, but then you got to talk about both of us. Don't just talk about me. I don't want to jip Mr.
My
Sierra.
emails are always saying, "Hi, Rick and Len."
Okay.
I'm the junior partner.
So that's the question. The question is, would you do a trial if you could get those drugs anyway? I need someone to answer.
I would say that's a great question for Dana Rathkoff. You know, like, what am I going to gain by following this regimen in a trial versus outside of a trial? See what she says. She'll probably tell you, well, by participating in the trial, you're contributing to the knowledge of, you know, the greater prostate cancer population of men. Because if it's outside of the trial, nobody really knows that data doesn't get integrated into all the other people that were treated in the trial. So it's a statistic that's just kind of not counted.
Yeah.
Also, I have a question. If you do a trial like that, and if they're going to be looking for, you know, like 8-year outcomes or something, then does that mean you cannot do any other trials during that 8 years? Because that would mess up their results.
The trial, as I understand it, is that there's 2 arms, which is, I guess, research talk. So arm 1 is 7 months and arm 2 is 7 months. So in I was randomly selected for the combination Zytiga, prednisone, and cabazitaxel, and that's what I would start with for 7 months. And then at the end of 7 months, you know, if I'm still here, and if they haven't sold me to the gypsies, my body, then I would do arm 2, which would be just the Zytiga and prednisone. So they would have a comparison of the 2. And to Len's point, I think that's Dr. Rathkoff would say that I'm doing this for the greater good, probably of prostate cancer, you know, as a, you know, so that, you know.
So let me just respond to Paul. Paul, if one is in a trial, one can always withdraw from a trial.
Yeah, actually, also, I'm sorry, I just realized this is a phase 2, so there is no long term. They're just looking for toxicities.
Yeah, is it phase 2? I'm not sure.
He said phase 2.
This phase 2.
Okay.
They're going to be checking my blood.
Well, you see, a lot of this is only about toxicity, to be honest, because that's the issue. When you take these 2 drugs together, what's the right level of each one? Because probably it's a good idea. If you could take them together, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea. But the problem are the side effects. So it's not even so much where, you know, what would we be testing in a phase 3? Whether it's better than not doing anything. I mean, I don't think they could even do that. I think that would be against medical ethics. I don't know. But I think that the key about this trial is actually the phase 2. I mean, what are the right doses if we're gonna prescribe these 2 drugs at the same time? And my issue here is it's what we were talking about before with you, Paul. Is do you want to do chemo and Zytiga at the same time? And I think that's a hell of a lot, especially for somebody who plans to work at the same time as doing these treatments. And you can do the chemo or you can do the Zytiga. I mean, the fact of the matter is you'll know pretty quickly how effective the Zytiga is, Richard. And if it is effective, the best that I've seen is only about 10 months anyway. So you're not looking at getting several years out of Zytiga. At least I don't know anybody that's, and there may be people out there, but I've never heard of anybody get an extended period out of Zytiga after enzalutamide, or the other way around.
Most people don't get a benefit at all.
I'm
That's
curious,
right.
Paul, I'm curious what options 1 and 2 were that Dana had. You said she had 3 options.
Well, you know, I was in shock when she was talking about this. I do remember that one of them seemed to say immunotherapy. One of the things I've respected about Rathkoff is that, you know, she said from the very beginning, you know, like, I have a plan for you. And, you know, as we go along, we'll see what happens. And in other words, it wasn't that she's had a plan for me of what she could do for me. So I've got my notes. Let's see. Hold on for a second.
Did she find any actionable genes when they did the genomic test?
Not yet.
I don't think he got the results yet, Peter.
Okay.
Okay, so these are the 3 things that she said. Now I'm just looking at her notes. There's a PARP inhibitors,
Right.
Which leads to a DNA damage repair.
Right, but just tell us the next one, because we know a little bit about the PARP inhibitors.
Okay.
What's the next one, Richard?
Immunotherapy. Well, she said the PARP inhibitors is about 18%. Immunotherapy, which leads to MSI high. A lot of something.
Okay.
And then there's a PTEN and other alterations.
Okay. So here's the thing. Both with the PARP inhibitor and with the immunotherapy, if she's talking about MSI and MMR, you have to feature that. And that's why we said to you, have you done the gene sequencing? So the question you have to ask her is, did this Memorial Sloan Kettering select test indicate that you would be a suitable candidate for either a PARP inhibitor or immunotherapy? Because if the select test did not, that's what Peter just asked you. Do you know the results from that test? If we could see the results from that test, we could help you with that. But you should be asking Dr. Rathkoff, well, am I a candidate? Because the select test would indicate if you were or not. Am I making sense?
Oh yes, you are. Because you know, like when they did the genomic profile, I was very curious to find out what they learned, and I'd never received a definitive answer of what it was that they learned. And I don't know if you can learn a definitive answer, but I know that since the summer they've tested me against 2 mutations, and I was, I think, negative. If that's the right. I don't think I made it to the BRCA2. I don't think. So the BRCA2, that's common with breast cancer and prostate cancer.
Okay, so if you don't have a mutation, if you don't have a BRCA mutation, then you're probably not a candidate for the PARP inhibitor. Either a BRCA mutation or another mutation that's in the BRCA pathway, because there are a bunch of other ones that are in that pathway. So if you did not have that mutation, then the PARP inhibitor is not a suitable drug for you. Now, they're trying to, there is some discussion that it may be good for everybody, and they're trying to test that out right now, but there's no good reason to think that it would be. But there are some tests that they're doing to see if people who don't have a BRCA mutation respond to a PARP inhibitor, but it's not a high probability play. Okay. The next thing is the MSI and the MMR. That's for a different drug. That's what Ken Anderson was talking about earlier on. And that's for an immunotherapy drug, an anti-PD-L1 drug, of which there are 2 or 3 that are available right now. But again, it depends on how you measure. So to answer your question, yes, there is a definitive result, and you should have a copy of those of your select report, and we can help you interpret it, or we can show it to Professor Bill. He can take a look at it. But that select report will indicate whether you are suitable for any of these drugs. Now, only about 3% of men actually have this high MSI, high MMR, 3% of prostate cancer men, according to what Mike Scott told us last week on his site. He reported a trial, and part of that information was that a very small percentage of men have this MSI MMR. Again, you've got to know if you're in there. So these options are all out there, but the question is, are you a candidate for any of them?
I don't think so.
If you're not a candidate, then neither of those options are available. So now we're looking at, well, what's next for you? Well, the simple answer would be to try the Zytiga, see if you get any time out of it. If you don't, then you revert to chemotherapy. And the reason, and what would you do? You'd stop the Zytiga, you'd start docetaxel. The reason that they're pairing cabazitaxel with Zytiga is because it has a slightly lesser side effect profile. But then again, you don't get to... Sorry?
They have said that. They've said that the side effect is more manageable for most men.
Right, but that's because they're giving it you with Zytiga. If they were giving you dose, so if they were, maybe the convention, unless there is a good drug, new drug that's out there that's really worthwhile, I would want to get involved. And with the greatest of respect to Dr. Dana Rathkoff, you have to watch out in centers of excellence for a bias towards pushing patients into trials, just the same way that sometimes in the community, you have to watch out for doctors pushing you into treatments you don't really need.
Right.
Make money. The bias, and it's not something you can discuss with your doctor, but you've got to have the antenna up, because there may be no good reason for you to be part of this trial. You can do all the same things without being part of the trial, and you can do it in your own time, and you can manage it better. For example, if you start with a certain dose of docetaxel and it's too much, you reduce it. And I don't know if you have the flexibility to change your doses of cabazitaxel. It's a phase 2 trial, so you may do, but I'm not sure. But these are all the sorts of issues. And what we do know is when you don't have a trial, the doctor has flexibility to do other things.
Yeah.
So, the question, the $64,000 question is what Len said. What's the benefit to me of doing the trial?
I think, that's a good question, Len, because I think what my takeaway from that meeting with Dr. Rathkoff is that, you're the perfect candidate, so it's like, oh, well, I'm the perfect candidate, but I wasn't thinking in terms of, what does it mean to me? I was like, from their perspective, I'm an ideal candidate. I think for a couple of reasons. I'm fit. I exercise. I've got a good attitude, and so that makes me I think a good candidate among other things. But I really don't know what the benefit is to me. I really don't know that answer. So that's a very important question. I'm a marketing guy, and I bought into it. I don't mean to, but I mean,
I think you're right, and I don't even know why you're so perfect, because the fact is you're set up to fail Zytiga.
Yeah.
The likelihood is you're going to fail Zytiga, not because it's a bad drug, but because you got so long out of your Xtandi, and most men that, as Jake said, most men don't get any time out of the other one when they've got a lot of time out of one. I mean, Rob, God rest his soul, tried Xtandi after 4 years on Zytiga. He got 4 years out of Zytiga, and then he switched to Xtandi, and I think from memory he got 2 or 3 months out of it, if that.
Richard, I would say another question you can ask Dana is, what is the rationale for using those two drugs together? Do they have evidence or some evidence that Zytiga is somehow synergistic working with cabazitaxel, or is this just a shot in the dark? I think that's an important question to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think there's like 80 guys that are being tested in this trial, 75 or 80.
Okay, well, but again, that's not a concern of yours.
Right, I understand. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know the research doctor, Dr. Susan Slovin. I don't know if you know her, but
yeah, I do.
Yeah, I wasn't that impressed with her explanation of the trial.
She's not one of my favorites. Let's put it that way.
No. So
she's a tough old bird, and she doesn't seem to have too much. Whenever I've heard her speak, she doesn't seem to have too much compassion.
No, she doesn't. It's a good point. I attended a meeting, an US2 meeting, and she talked about how prostate cancer, that they have a menu of treatments, and this menu is available to all prostate cancer oncologists, regardless of urology or whatever. And so, there's only a certain amount of items on this menu, and it's up to the discretion of the physician who's treating you which option they're going to choose for you, which appetizer, which main meal, which dessert.
Right.
And she's talking about selecting things off of a menu, and I thought, that's not very encouraging. So, but
well, look, let's do this. You have an appointment on Friday with Dr. Radkoff, correct?
Right.
And first of all, you want to find out what the biopsy of your the mass showed.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And we're going to wrap up pretty quickly, guys, but something just occurred to me. When they did the select test, did they do it on blood or did they do it on tissue?
I'm pretty sure they did it on blood at the time. I mean, they do have tissue samples of me. Like 2 months earlier or a month earlier, they'd done a colonoscopy. So I don't know if they went in and accessed any of those samples, but I'm pretty sure it was just based upon blood.
Okay. So I don't know enough about the Memorial Sloan Kettering Select test, But
Impact.
ideally, what you need, impact. Sorry, the memorial.
Rick, I had that in 2014 at MSK Impact, and they use the biopsy tissue for somatic mutations, and then they draw blood for the germline. That's what they did with me, anyway.
Okay, so in that case, I don't know how recent the tissue was that they used for you, Richard, but if this tissue that they just removed, that they just biopsied, is prostate cancer and it's just been taken, that's what you want to have sequenced.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's important because if the select test is based on an old tissue sample, things change. So you got to find out from Dana Radcliffe what the impact. Sorry, I keep saying select. What the impact, the Memorial Sloan Kettering impact results, what tissue they were taken from.
Yeah.
And if it's more than a year old, it doesn't tell you enough.
Yeah.
And what you should be doing is getting this new tissue sequenced.
Yeah. They wanted to start me on the trial last Friday, but it's been postponed to this Friday, but it might even be postponed to the following Friday. So,
well, you can postpone it. You can postpone it.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is that Rathkoff is not rushing me into this. She's I guess what I'm trying to say is she's being prudent. She too is looking for more information. She wasn't satisfied with the pathology report from the biopsy, so she asked for a second review. And and when I talked to her office coordinator today, she said she's not sure that Rathkoff's going to go ahead even this Friday. So,
but what I'm saying is that even if she says, let's go ahead, you can say, I want to wait. I want to think about this. Okay?
Yeah.
And then when you've got the answer to some of these questions, come back and talk to us.
Yeah. I did let the office coordinator know that when I see Rathkoff on Friday, I'm coming with questions. And to let her know I'm coming with questions.
Okay. All right, guys, we've run over. Paul, thank you very much for graciously offering to save your questions till next Tuesday. Yes, next Tuesday. I will make sure that I'll make sure you come in. You are the first.
Okay.
If I don't, you remind me. Okay.
Okay.
Feel free.
All right.
All right, guys, we covered a lot again tonight.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Okay. Any last thoughts? Peter's busy looking out the window there. Peter, you be looking out the window though.
I got the cleaning people I'm trying to figure out what I have to clean before they come.
Oh,
how come it's so sunny where Peter is? I mean, it's like 10:15 p.m. East Coast and it's totally pitch black, and he's got a lot of sun where he is.
Yeah, it's only 5:15 here.
Wow, where are you? Hawaii?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Maui. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Peter, did you get to that golf tournament out there?
No, I don't play golf. I paddle and swim and snorkel, and I'm not a golfer.
Okay.
I saw it in the headline.
And then he picks bananas off the tree in his garden, right?
Yes. Right.
Well, and what else?
Citrus right now. Citrus is big right now. I don't want to make you guys feel worse than you are.
Thank you.
I've got a very fruitful grapefruit tree right outside my door here that was covered in snow last week. It was amazing. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you,
Good
Rick.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good night.
Bye-bye.
All right.